Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us from anywhere in the world, just like you can your cloud PC. So I'm your host, Christian Montoya. Thanks for joining our second one of the year. And as a reminder, I am a product manager on the Windows 365 team, focusing on identity and security. And I am joined today by three guests. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Abe, if you want to go first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abe Pineda. I'm also a product manager in the Windows 365 team, and I'm focusing on the areas of device management, troubleshooting, and resizing of cloud PCs.
Perfect. Thanks, Abe. Femi? Oh, Femi, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. As I said, my name is Femi Adebayo. I'm a PM on the Windows 365 team. I'm focused on Azure network connection and also on the Microsoft hosted network infrastructure. So basically anything that has to do with your network connecting to the cloud PC, I'm the person to talk to.
Awesome. Thanks, Femi. And Robert?
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert. Unlike everybody else, I don't have to own any features and I actually get to work directly with customers. And my job in particular as a product manager for Win365 is interfacing with specific customers, getting some feedback and understanding what your requirements are so that I can tell these guys to reprioritize or to think about how to build the product better.
Yes, Robert. You do poke us sometimes, but it's very much appreciated. So for folks joining us today, yeah, you have a wide array of expertise here, whether it's the feature areas or whether it's just your deployment environments. And so please ask questions here on the comment section, on the chat. We are talking about the product here today. Nothing, speculative or anything. But if you have product questions, we can definitely help you out as you join us this morning or wherever you are. So let's see. The first question is, from John, do Windows 365 computer objects reside in the Active Directory OU? I remember they did, but would you set it up in such a way that they are in your Active Directory OU? So Femi, would you be able to answer this question?
Yeah, so the question was, do Windows computer objects reside in the ADOU, right? Mm-hmm. That's the question. Yeah, they do. They do reside in the ADOU. So this part of your initial, like when you set up your initial cloud Azure network configuration, one of the requirements that we check is that to make sure that your ADOU is specifically set up to your organization, where you're going to be connecting that specific domain to. So
yeah, I think that's a good point because that is part of the network configuration. So it's something that we validate before you can use it. But I guess just to also bring it full circle is that you can do domain join or Azure AD join, or sorry, hybrid Azure AD join or Azure AD join. In the case of deploying Azure AD join cloud PCs, we don't do any sort of device write back. Those are Azure AD device objects only. So if you did set it up in your Active Directory in an OU for resources, database access, whatever it is, you'd have to do that through hybrid. And Robert, I don't know if you're trying to time on as well.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about as well. One of the great things that I get to do when customers are starting off in Windows 365 is to say, there are some complexities if you want to do hybrid Azure AD join, set up your network, bring it into your VNet, etc. But if you just want to get a feel for what the cloud PC is going to feel like, Azure AD join, Microsoft hosted network, don't deal with any of the complexities, just get a feel for it, and then make a decision on what you need to do and bring into the picture. Often is a fast way to get things started.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good point. The Azure AD join stuff, I personally worked on it, so I have a lot of investment and a soft spot for it. But yeah, it went full general availability back in May, so a couple months ago. So what Robert's saying is it's fully there if you want to just kickstart it, see what it feels like. And we have another question coming in. So I've run into a few situations where having a restart option from the start menu would be nice. instead of starting from the web UI, the windows365.microsoft.com. I see some are setting registry keys to add this feature back into Windows, and this can be pushed via Intune using PowerShell with proactive remediation. I was wondering if this option is available in the settings catalog of a device policy or somewhere else in Intune. Robert, you've deployed stuff. Are you aware of any settings catalog stuff to push that setting?
I don't know off the top of my head, to be completely honest. That being said, I think during the call, I might be able to look around in the catalog and see if I can find it or not. Of course, if you've lived in MEM to some extent and Intune to some extent, you have the ability to do a search in the catalog. So hopefully there are enough things in there and keywords that you can use to find it. If not, then it might have to be an custom OMA URI based, actually call out the CSP and make that configuration work. But I'll try if I can find it.
Yeah, because I know it's a little bit unique because, again, it's a remote session. A lot of settings are exposed for the local logged in session, but I know sometimes it's tricky with the remote session. You know, if you find it, great, but otherwise, we could always comment back here. And also, this is a nice shout out. If you have any, specific questions and you aren't able to join today, or just want to continue discussion after the AMA, feel free to go to the ak.ms/W365 feedback. And that's where we could, look at feature requests and other just general questions around the service. And so hopefully, we get your feedback in that place, and maybe something like the setting we can actually bring into the product itself. That way folks don't have to go with proactive remediation and PowerShell scripts. So feel free to funnel requests through there. Oh, perfect. Okay, so another question we have. What are the actual plans for the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager side here in general? Any plans to extend Configuration Manager with more features, primarily in MSIX, App Attach Space, and also the private App Store? Feeling that Configuration Manager is signing out of scope for any new features, and only Intune Cloud is enforced more and more. So I don't have as much knowledge on that space from the Endpoint Manager team here. Sorry, we don't have anyone from the Endpoint Manager team here, so I don't really have any of that direction. I don't know if anyone else does or knows where to point people.
I've been away from the team for a good 10 months now. The typical story has been that, it might be a little bit slower to get things, if you remember a few years ago, as Microsoft said, we're at cloud first, mobile first type of thing. So it's natural for features to come into Intune first. It's a faster way to get things in there. But I think for most part, a lot of those features have come back into Config Manager as well. So I can't make any claims for what's going to happen, but I think we can look forward to, or keep giving feedback to the team that I used to belong to, which is doing the same thing with customers, but on the UEM and MEM side of things. And when you do, I think when the voice is there, the teams will be more receptive to trying to get those things into feature as well.
Okay. Yeah, and we can always try to get their feedback here as well. So, thanks for the question. Let's see. Another question from Trix. It'd be nice to let users know when their cloud PCs are ready with a customizable email. And think you guys are planning this. Any updates? There's even a new feature in Endpoint Manager called Enrollment Notification being released. Is that it? Is that the feature? So anyone care to answer? Abe, I don't know if you want to join in here.
Yeah, I can add a little bit of information here. So we are working in basically what's called the Cloud PC agent, and that's going to live within a user's Cloud PC. And once that work comes into place, or once we ship that, that'll also allow us to release other sort of functionality that's tied to notification channels within the Cloud PC. So, for example, we'll be able to provide in-session notifications to users I know that this question specifically asks before the user can access their cloud PC. So basically, is my cloud PC ready to be accessed? So we could provide notification channels through email. I have to follow up with the PM that owns this specific feature area. But just so a little bit more context on how we're going to be notifying and communicating to users, there'll also be something in the roadmap that's called the maintenance windows. So this will tell the end user when, for example, we are like the admin might be running like patching on their cloud PC, or perhaps they want to run an update in the specific cloud PC. So that means that the end user is going to have specific downtime, or perhaps the admin wants to resize that specific cloud PC. So we want to let the end user know. So in terms of in-session notifications and in-session maintenance windows, we are building ways to communicate to the end user. As far as when is my cloud PC ready before I can access that, that's something that we'll need to follow up on.
Got it. Thanks, Abe. So I think the summary is that it's not tied to the new enrollment notification feature, but something else that we would be building. So, all right, thank you. And actually, Femi, that reminds me. I know that we don't have this feature that Trix was asking, but don't we have something else that's tied to email notifications?
Oh, yes. So we recently, as of end of this month, we recently built a feature called Alerts in Windows 365. And basically, what this does is that today, endpoint admins have, they have to kind of monitor cloud PC, monitor the infrastructure that the cloud PC is connected to. And what we did today, or what we're introducing, is that a way for them to be aware of any specific event notifications around cloud PC. So, for example, if they set up an Azure network connection or provisioning, or an image upload fails, they have an option today to set up an alert to get notifications on those specific events, right? And they can also define, severe alerts. They can turn on those alert rules. They can kind of specify if they want to be notified by email or by email, or just by the notification channel in Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We're looking at also some capability to have text, but currently text is not enabled. You just have notification via email or via notification through the Microsoft Endpoint Manager channel. But this is just a way for endpoint admin to be aware of any critical issues within the cloud PC, and they can go ahead and take actions on those specific issues.
Perfect. And you said that just came out to preview, right?
Yes. And yeah, those came out to preview. Yes.
All right. So definitely go try that out. And do you remember where that service is in Endpoint Manager so folks can find it?
Yes, it's by the tenant administration. So when you go to your Microsoft Endpoint Manager and you scroll down, you would go to a place called tenant administration, and you would see alerts as a separate section on that page.
Perfect. Yeah. So definitely go try that out. Give us feedback again through that feedback channel we mentioned earlier. That way Femi can make sure that that alerting mechanism works for your needs. Again, these ones are the reactive ones. That the proactive one, the email for the user. Again, that we can plan for that. But it looks like we have an email mechanism, so that's kind of good to know.
Sure. Cool. And one thing to also add is that we also have customized localized language, so you can customize in about last time I checked was about 15 languages. So you can customize how you want, what language you want to get those email, and so that for folks that are working in different regions or speak different languages, you can read those emails in a specific localized language.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Femi. Good point. We do have another question coming in from True Rock. We've been using Windows 365 for about 5 days, including this morning. This afternoon, when we try to log on to Windows 365, we get an error message: disconnected, couldn't connect because there are no available resources. Do you have any tips on how to troubleshoot or address this issue? Abe, can you take that one?
Yeah, sure thing. So connectivity is definitely one of the most important areas of our service, because if you don't have a stable connection to your cloud PC, then you're not going to be able to access your session. And recently, we actually just public preview a new feature that's called the Connectivity Health Checks and Connectivity History Report. So what the connectivity health checks do is that these are checks that are constantly running in the backend. So if you're familiar with the Azure network checks, the ANC checks, then this will probably sound familiar to you as well. So the ANC checks are constantly running in the backend to make sure that you're ready to provision cloud PCs. But what happens after you successfully provision cloud PCs? You still got to connect to them. So the connectivity health checks are also a set of checks that are constantly running in the backend to make sure that your cloud PC is in a connectable state. So it will check that basically there's specific components that need to be up and running and in a healthy state so that you can connect to a cloud PC. So not to get too technical and into the weeds, but things like the stack listener, things like the session host, making sure that the cloud PC is domain joined, making sure that the cloud PC has domain trust, and a bunch of other things that basically need to be in place in order for a user to connect to their cloud PC. So basically just making sure that that VM is healthy and up and running and ready to be connected to by the end user. So in the case where any of these checks fail, for example, like I think that the question was like that the message was that my resources are down, or there's no resources available right now. Typically, that happens when the session host within that cloud PC is not in a healthy state. So session host is just an element that needs to be healthy so that user can connect to a cloud PC. If you navigate to MEM, there is a new tab that we've added called Performance, which is in preview, and that's where the connectivity health checks live. That'll tell you if that cloud PC is in an available or unavailable state. And if it's in an unavailable state, that means that the end user cannot access the cloud PC. So what do you do then? So we we built a troubleshooting tool for the admin to run so that it can basically make sure that if any of the connectivity health checks that we're running in the backend is not available, we can troubleshoot it. We can also run some VM extensions in the backend to troubleshoot for other things that maybe the admin might not even be aware of, like the remote agent on the VM not running, or the bootloader, or basically just like technical components that, again, need to be working in order for the end user to connect to a cloud PC. So you can run that troubleshooter, and hopefully that will fix the issue. Right now, again, we have like specific set of troubleshooting steps that we're running, but we'll keep building on those steps, as months and years goes on, to make sure that we keep providing that one-click solution for our customers, so that they can get their users back up and running and connected to their VM.
Yeah, so True Rock, if you're still listening to us, definitely give us feedback. Let us know. Try out the troubleshooter. We definitely want to see that feedback and see if it is able to remediate for you. And again, if we're not live, then please provide that feedback on our Windows 365 feedback channel. Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Abe. Very, very thorough. So I know there's a lot of work going on for connectivity. So making sure that users not just get their cloud PC, but actually have access to it. So cool. Thanks, Abe. We do have a question from, actually a follow-up question from Trix. Will you be adding usage reports in Endpoint Manager? It would be nice to see how much these users are using their cloud PCs, whether it's weekly, monthly, last log on, really all metrics. So Trix, that's a good follow-up question. Anyone who can take that one?
I can take it.
Okay.
Yeah, so usage reports are actually going to go into public preview pretty soon. And these are actually going to live in the same performance tab that I just mentioned. So basically, this performance tab, what we're envisioning within this new feature is your one-stop for the admin for anything related to like the cloud PC performance, the usage, the cloud PC health, the cloud PC connectivity, even the latency of the connection between the end user and their cloud PC. And usage is actually one of those reports that we're going to be adding there. So with that new report, the admin will be able to see, as the name says, how much is the end user using their cloud PC. Are they using their cloud PC enough? Are they not using it enough? And if they're not using it enough, do I need to deprovision that cloud PC for that user and maybe assign that license to a user that might need it? These usage reports are actually going to go in public preview both for at the single device level, so basically at the user level, if you want to pick specific user. But we're actually also going to be providing a usage report at the tenant level so that you can see what your usage is across your tenant, so that you can apply filters to see which ones are my set of users that use their cloud PC the most, or that do not use my cloud PCs at all. So we're really providing that eagle eye view for the tenant admin in terms of usage. And that's also going to come for connectivity and for latency, and other important metrics that we think are going to be very, very relevant and useful for the admin.
Perfect. And what are I know that we actually did add our own reports to Endpoint Manager recently. I know that usage is one that's coming up. Can you summarize, or Robert, either Robert or Abe, can you summarize what the most recent ones that we just added?
I can mention that. Yeah. So the connectivity health checks is going to be one of them. That one exists at the single device level right now, but that'll also come at the tenant level, so that you can see again across all your devices. We're not providing an ETA for that one just yet, but just know that that one is coming. So that's in the roadmap. Usage, as I mentioned, is one of them, and that will actually ship at the tenant level and device level. So you'll be able to see the usage across all your devices in your tenant. Another one that's coming is remoting connection or latency. So that report is going to tell the admin what the latency is between a specific user and their cloud PC. And that's very helpful if you provision a cloud PC in a specific region, but maybe the end user is sitting far away from that region. So you need to move that cloud PC closer to the user's region so that the latency is lower. So there's those three. There's a lot of stuff coming, so I don't know if I'm missing anything, but I believe those are the most important ones. And oh yeah, there's another one, which is the resource performance one, which that's already existed for a while now, which is basically telling the admin what the performance of that cloud PC is in terms of the specific specs of that cloud PC. So basically, is this cloud PC having like RAM spikes, or is it using a lot of the CPU? So the resource perf it's a really good one to also know, is my user utilizing very CPU intensive applications, and do I need to resize them to a more powerful cloud PC and assign them a higher tier license so that they don't consume as much of those CPU and RAM resources. So those are the main ones that I can think of. I don't think that I'm missing anything right now.
Got it. Yeah. No, I think that's really great, because like you said, we're investing in connectivity, we're investing in all these reports. Femi, you just talked about alerting. And so as you hopefully can tell, we're trying to make sure that once you set up your environment, that you are set up for success and that your users are set up for success. So yeah, hopefully you get to see and use all these different tools to keep your your remote users up and running. So yeah, thank you, Abe. One question did come in from Lewis. Is there a way to attach Azure files or other storage to a Windows 365 desktop so that it appears to be local? My challenge is getting the QuickBooks Database Manager to recognize and scan this additional storage so that I can share the company file with multiple Windows 365 desktops. So this kind of comes into the whole infrastructure section. Early on, Femi mentioned that you can either bring your own network or use a Microsoft hosted network. I think this falls into the category of bringing your own network. If you bring your own network, then you can attach different file shares, databases onto that network and be accessible from all the different cloud PCs that are there. I think the biggest reason is because you still control network traffic, you still control, you know, IAM access, whether it's the database itself or whatnot. So that's kind of my immediate thought. But Robert, I'm actually going to ask you: are there other scenario configurations that you've seen customers do that also requires kind of like network line of sight, et cetera?
Sure. I think one of the things that we typically see as the immediate thought process for customers who actually live in Azure quite a bit is to use Azure blob spaces as that going point for storage, and then to literally just do an attachment of an Azure storage or a blob storage space as an additional part of your infrastructure. Then it's within your resource groups to be able to call out. So you're not doing intricate configurations on the Azure side. It's a little bit easier to actually connect those things. That's the quickest routes that I have seen a lot of the customers actually take.
And then have you seen, and maybe in the hybrid join scenarios, have you seen a lot of customers have to access resources from on-premise? Like, are folks using these express routes or site to site to actually to use things that aren't moving to the cloud?
Sure. And less for storage in that case, and more for applications that sit on the other side of the network, if you will. So if the application servers and resources that customers and users need to access live on premises, that hybrid Azure AD join scenarios, as well as just being connected that way, makes a lot of sense. Even if the customer or the end user CPC is Azure AD join only, in that case, they're putting up something like Azure App Proxy to make sure that configuration is there to secure that interaction with the on-premises application server. So there are myriads of ways that these types of connections to, whether it be storage and or applications or any other endpoints that exist, to be connected from the cloud PC, just like it's a physical PC, right? That's our goal to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this goes back to your point, Robert, of, get up and running with Windows 365, try the Azure AD join, just try to make sure that it works and your management works. And then, bring in the other components that you need, like the file share access, like QuickBooks, which you might need your own network for. But yeah. Cool. Thanks for that insight, Robert. Let's see. So we're still waiting on some questions to come in, but I did want to highlight some things that we did announce since last time. Hopefully you joined us. So again, Femi mentioned the alerting, which is in the tenant administration in Endpoint Manager for kind of reactive notifications on issues with provisioning policies, custom image uploads, and network connections. Let's see. Abe mentioned the connectivity, but Abe, actually, I want to talk a little bit about our Resize efforts, because I know that's been a big feature. Like you mentioned, the report for usage reports that's going to come out soon, and I feel like the whole point of that is to make sure you're using your licenses correctly, or you're getting the most bang for your buck. And I feel like Resize is a big part of that story. So can you tell me just what's there now? What we've heard from customers, and if the I think some Resize feature came out this month as well.
Yeah, for sure. So when when Windows 65 was first announced, and when we first released the product last year, we released it with this functionality called Resize. So Resize is a post-provision functionality that allows users or admins to increase the RAM, the cores, and the storage of end users' cloud PCs on the fly. So different than a provision action, which you're first provisioning a cloud PC. Once you provision that cloud PC, perhaps you want to resize it. Perhaps you want to add more storage, more cores, more RAM to that cloud PC. So resizing allows admins to perform that action on end users' cloud PCs. And you can do that by just resizing a cloud PC, or perhaps your trigger point might be something like the usage reports, or even the more than the usage reports, the resource performance reports that tells you whether you're having CPU spikes or RAM spikes, or you're using a lot of your CPU, and therefore you want to resize that cloud PC. So it provides that flexibility for the admins to meet the expectations and the needs of the end user. Having said that, Resize only works with direct design licenses. So basically, if you're assigning a license through the Microsoft Admin Center, when a resize takes place, then our service will remove the old license on behalf of the admin and assign the new license, and then that will resize the cloud PC. So that's how it works today. Also, we just recently announced, and we just recently shipped downsizing. So not only are we allowing our customers to resize cloud PCs up and add more storage and RAM and cores, but we're actually allowing them to also downsize a user's cloud PC. So today, just a caveat, you can only downsize RAM and cores. There's no downsizing of OS storage. That's not possible at this point in time. But you can free up that license if you want to give it to perhaps another user that needs it. So again, we're providing more flexibility now with downsizing. And we also have a huge improvement in the roadmap as well. As I mentioned, resizing only works for direct assign licenses. The majority of our enterprise customers will use AD groups to assign licenses to their end users when they want to provision cloud PCs. And as you might anticipate, because customers are using AD groups, as I mentioned before, in the direct assign case, we removed that license on behalf of the admin. We are not able to touch customers' AD groups. However, and because we're not able to touch customers' AD groups, we're not able to resize those users. But we are working on a solution for this that will allow our customers to resize users that have been provisioned through AD groups. More importantly, we're also going to bring this functionality in bulk. So we're actually going to allow our customers and our endpoint admins to resize end users in bulk. So if you want to resize one device, that's great. If you want to resize 1,000, we're also going to allow you to do that. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm also not providing timelines on this one. I know it's a very exciting feature, but just know that it's coming. It's going to come soon. So we'll keep you posted.
That's a good point. Robert, I don't know how much you've heard of the resize, and look, I use these group-based licenses. It's just easier to manage. So hopefully, I mean, are a lot of your customers, would you think, utilize this new feature?
Absolutely. And Abe really hit it on the point there in terms of like group-based licensing and the amount of group-based licensing that customers already use. And so for us to try to make sure that we're hitting the customer scenarios is not me personally, but my teammates' direct responsibility for bringing that feedback to the team and saying, look, this is what we have to do because this is the way customers will function, right? This is what customers are accustomed to. Per user license has its limitations of what can be possible, especially when we're working in bulk capacity of these instances of CPCs. But yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of customers will leverage this, either going up or down. And in response to the reporting that we talked about a little bit earlier by Abe as well, like you said, Christian, which is, like, if we're looking and seeing that the resources are being used and they seem to need more, we'll resize up. And it'll be a group of these people. You see another set of people and users that have been licensed that aren't using it as much, and it's just eating up space, right? Then we might resize those people down, but we don't have to do it individually. We can do it as a group. And I think that's the beauty of trying to make this as smooth and, I won't say hands-off necessarily, but less of a hassle for the administrator. We want to make sure that they have the time and resources to think up new and better ways to service their users.
Got it. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, because I know that Abe and I have been talking about resizing a bit. So just understanding and knowing that customers do this bulk management. It's not really as one-off as maybe you expect. But knowing that any sort of this grouping, whether it's the action or the licensing, that'll be really important for our customers. So that's good to know. I think the other thing, Abe, that you mentioned is that, and I just want to kind of clarify and confirm with the audience here, is that we do have some actions in Endpoint Manager that are already bulk actions. So whether that's the restart, reprovision, there's a couple others. There's the restore functionality. So we do have some bulk actions. I just know that resize is is a little tricky because it's a little bit more complicated. It's not just a one-time it's not just like a single click operation. There's some options for the admin. So but yeah, so you can use the bulk actions today for some other features. But Resize, I know that we do want to expose that because most customers will do it in some sort of aggregate. So cool. Yeah, thanks for that, Abe. I know Resize is a huge feature. Hopefully, with all the reporting, again, customers will use that really well. So I want to ask another question. So for Femi, you mentioned earlier that can you work on the networking, the Azure Network Connection or ANC. Can you actually just briefly summarize what the ANC, the network connection is, and then any recent add-ons or additions to that feature?
Sure, Kristen. So basically, as part of your cloud PC, purchasing a cloud PC license today, you need a way. If you're an enterprise customer, you need a way to kind of set up your Azure network connection infrastructure and be able to kind of provision that cloud PC. So basically, what ANC does is basically a feature in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager that helps kind of helps you provision your cloud PC profile. So basically, once you go to your cloud PC profile, you can do an Azure network connection, and you have kind of two connection types where you have a Azure AD join option, or you have a hybrid AD join option. And this is to help just to give you the flexibility of if you're bringing your own your own network infrastructure, or you want to use the Microsoft hosted network infrastructure. And it's just a way for us to make sure that you have all the right connectivities and you have all the right checks in place for us to be able to provision your cloud PC. And one unique thing about the Azure network connection is also that typical enterprise customers will just bring your own network and they set it up for you. I mean, you set it up for yourself, and there's no kind of check to understand if you need all the appropriate things like your Azure subscription, if your endpoint connectivity options are IPs are kind of in line. So what we do today is that once you do a Azure network connection setup, we also kind of do checks to make sure that your environment for your your VNet, your environment for your Azure subscription, everything is in place, and we can actually go ahead and provision. It's just an additional secret sauce we provide to make sure that you're customized the right way and you have all the right requirements before we actually move you onto the provision stage to provision your cloud PC. It's just to help us check that you have all the right requirements and you have all the right configurations, so that down the line when you're about to provision your cloud PC, you don't have issues with accessing your cloud PC.
Yeah, and you mentioned so like when we first released the service last year, we had a kind of starting set of these network connection health checks. Like I think you just mentioned the subscriptions, some things on the network. Have we added any checks since our initial GA?
Yes, we did. We recently added the intern restriction enrollment check, and basically what this does is just to because as part of your your enterprise setup for your cloud PC, you need to kind of go through provision it through the Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So what this is just to make sure that you have the right license and you're for intern, and you're configured to allow Windows enrollment. So if you have a Windows device versus an Android device versus an iOS device, is to make sure that one, you have the license to be able to provision your cloud PC, and two is just to make sure that you are allowed within Windows enrollment to be able to provision your cloud PC. So that was one that we added. The other one we added was the localization readiness check. So as part of your setup for your cloud PC, you have an option to specify the language you want your cloud PC to be provisioned in. And what we did was that we had a check that checks once you set up your Azure network connection as part of your resource. We check to make sure that the specific language that you've selected, we're able to kind of provision your cloud PC in that language, and just kind of do those checks to make sure that those language options you selected are reachable, and you can go ahead and provision your cloud PC. Those are the two recent checks we added just to make sure that we're optimizing our customer experience.
That's perfect. Thanks. Yeah. I think maybe I'll say it a third or fourth time now. I mean, we definitely hope customers use the Microsoft hosted network just because we handle a lot of that for you. And if you're already deploying like VPN profiles to physical devices, you can do the same to the cloud PCs. But I know that Femi is trying to make sure that whenever you do need your own network for an array of reasons, if you need to bring your own network, that you have that capability. So yeah, thanks, Femi. I know that there's a lot of good work coming in all those health checks and just making sure we're both proactive and reactive there.
Sure.
And I'll add to that a little bit to say, with the sort of evolution of how the Azure Network Connection, the ANCs are working now, I get a lot less questions from customers of like, what's going on? Why is this not working? They go directly to the status of the connector status. What you'll see is if there is an error, there's something going on, you have the ability to dig in a little bit deeper. It gives you some information as well as some links to go to figure out how to fix that problem on your own, rather than having to feel like I need to go call support or get a ticket open and figure these things out with somebody. That certainly helps, but it might cut down on time by looking at our documentation and say, hey, have you checked these things? And so it's been really helpful from what I'm hearing from our customers is the granularity of information that we give as not just a checkbox of this is not working, but we actually give further information like here's what you can do to get that fixed and get you running on your way.
Thanks, Robert. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one of the kind of research we kind of did too when we initially launched the ANC feature. And basically we had customers saying if you could have something like a documentation page, that guide that you could lead me to help me understand what the actual check problem is, it could move me up faster. So when we implemented those checks, those were the things we added to make sure that customers can kind of self-serve themselves, and they can kind of self-serve triage and be able to kind of resolve issues. And from the last last review with that has been helpful. Documentation has been helpful in terms of just getting customer to move along rather than having to call support. We still want them to call support if they have issues that they can't resolve, because we want to support them holistically. But this has helped to kind of guide them across as they move on the cloud PC journey.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Actually, I had one more question. Maybe Robert, from the customer perspective, because I know that Femi again mentioned that we have the health checks for the network connection, the ANC, for different reasons, for the subscription, for the if it's hybrid HD join, being able to find the domain on the network. Do you, for the customers that you've experienced, if there's any issues, like, is it usually one set of admins that can resolve it, or does there tend to be communication, just because there's like Azure AD, there's Azure, there's domain? Like, how involved can that be?
I'll start with it depends. It's my worst and hated answer is it depends, but it does depend. And where those things come into play is it really depends on how far along in sort of that cloudification, if you will, the journey the customer is in. Sorry, something got locked up. Am I still talking? I am still talking. It really depends on how far in the journey the customer is in. And best case scenario is the on-prem AD, person that's managing that is also the Azure AD person, right? Or someone that's working on the network side is also working on the Azure network side of things. Mm-hmm. But if they are separate, there's obviously a number of conversations and steps that need to be taken, and hops, if you will, for the network for that to get connected, both literally and kind of figuratively speaking. Security always comes into play as to what's different in the cloud versus what's on premises. So those things also become a factor of how quickly someone can take action on the customer side. That being said, when there is clear directives in terms of like, here's what you need to do, and which I think we've really tried hard to make sure we spell those things as much as possible, then I think it helps to be able to pull in the right people sooner rather than later, because we want to make sure that people who are living in MEM and Intune and Config Manager are part of the conversation early on. If there are VDI admins that's been doing a lot of things on that side, are early on in the conversation being part of the process of making some decisions, or so that they're not left out of the conversation altogether. It is both a virtualized infrastructural sort of management story, as well as just device and application management story. Networking, of course, again, comes into play. There are many moving parts.
Yeah.
So that's why it all depends.
Yeah.
But I think it helps to bring the right people into the conversation, I'm not going to call out Win 365 as the unifier of IT in a customer site, but it does help to bring those people onto the same table and have those discussions as necessary.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I think it just basically just makes our checks even more important. So yeah, I guess get started early if you're going to use any network connection, really. That way you can just start getting those tested out, and in worst case, you see which errors, which people to involve, and then you get that resolved. So yeah, I just wanted the customer take. So thank you very much, Robert, for entertaining that. Let's see here. We do have another question coming from Tech Community. These AMAs are very helpful. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining. Another question is how to block users from launching Cloud PC using the web client via conditional access. Thanks to awesome instruction, which are now in our public docs. Because I could not enforce prompting users for MFA at specific intervals. Will these be additional controls? Will there be additional controls for accessing / launching Cloud PCs, MFA, or even other controls? So actually, I'll take that one as kind of like the identity security person here for the team. So one, the conditional access controls are kind of that centralized point because we are driven through Azure AD and Azure AD authentication. Those conditional access controls, they do give you that flexibility. When you're authenticating to the Windows 365 app, you can say, whether it's browser or native app based, or whether it is on specific device platforms, since Windows gives its own hint versus Mac versus Android, etc. Conditional access is our main engine. And just to make sure I kind of clear all the bases, because our access is through the Azure Virtual Desktop kind of backbone. To set up the conditional access, you actually usually would also want to set those policies on that same app. To answer your specific question, will there be more controls for launching accessing Cloud PCs? There is a this new feature in Azure AD, which I believe it's in a public preview state. There's a new control of a grant control which says essentially MFA every time, or the sign-in frequency. Right now, the minimum duration is 1 hour, but instead of 1 hour as a minimum, it says every time. That is very specific right now to, I believe it's 2 actions. One is a user enrolling a device into Intune. And then the second is for user risk score. So if a user shows up in our Microsoft threat detection as extremely risky, then just make sure they re-MFA again, just to truly verify that it is the user that they say they are. We're looking at potentially expanding that every time to Windows 365 somehow. So please give us feedback at the feedback link. We want to see how we can incorporate that. But we also want to make sure that we're not overly prompting folks. The Intune device action or Intune enroll action is more or less a one-time action for a user. A sign-in risk, that's probably, it's a good thing for security. Just making sure if it's risky that they're getting prompted again. The connection would happen essentially every day if a user is using their Cloud PC for their work. So we want to make sure we have the right guardrails in place, so that way it's not becoming, pesky of MFA every single time you want to use your Cloud PC. But we also understand that that's what, and maybe you can confirm here or on the feedback channel that's actually what you want as an admin, a security admin. So we're trying to balance that and make sure that if we ever do have this every time, that we take that into account. And so again, we're looking at that's, but again, everything would be through Azure AD conditional access. And just, if you follow that short link, the W365CA, that does have our current guidance on setting up conditional access, like I mentioned, with the 2 apps, with the Windows 365 and the Azure Virtual Desktop app, and with a link to even specify down saying that if you're accessing, Office, Outlook, SharePoint, and all that stuff, that you can even tie it down to specifically cloud PCs for users that have them. So hopefully, that answered your question. We are looking at the frequency, but we just want to be very cognizant of how we do that.
I think one of the things that I want to make sure customers and users are just careful of in terms of making this type of requirement, and this is a thought process that I personally have, is how much of it becomes so redundant, right? It's so frequent that people just start saying yes to all the MFA prompts. And if you do that, that then becomes a new security risk of anybody prompting an MFA on your device. You might just inadvertently just say yes without really thinking twice about it. I think it's helpful when a prompt like an MFA is meaningful and it has purpose. But when it becomes redundant, much like typing in your password or typing in your PIN, you're starting to lose the security factor of why that's there in the first place, because it's something that's you're inundated with all the time. It's just second nature to just say yes. So I personally think it's something that you want to think through on, be careful about implementing and how you implement it. But I also understand from a security perspective, sometimes those requirements do exist. And I'm not saying that's a wrong thing or the right thing. It's just make sure end users are aware of what that means for them.
And Robert, I think to your point, I mean, even Microsoft, we have these different like blog posts publicly about how we manage our own users, and it was not too long ago that we basically said, look, we are reducing how often we make users change their passwords, because if we make them change their password every 60 days, they write it down in an insecure location, or they just add another exclamation point. And so I think that's kind of along the same vein of if it's too repetitive and not meaningful, then it actually exposes more, potential security risks.
Yes.
So I definitely do understand your point. And again, for security admins out there, any admins out there, we definitely value security. We just want to make sure that the user experience matches the secure experience. So, but again, always we want your feedback. So please do give that to us.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Robert. We do have a question from Ian. We have recently deployed Windows 365 Enterprise in our environment. Upon provisioning our first PC using hybrid Azure djoin, we have noticed an additional computer object labeled CPCHTH. Is this something required for the health checks of the service? I can find info on Microsoft Docs or now Microsoft Learn regarding what this object is used for. Femi, can you talk to this one?
I'm not sure. I probably have to. So it looks like it's a new label as part of the computer objects. Is this on the like provisioning once provision policy area on the cloud PC area itself?
So I think this is the. So I thought this was the for the health checks.
Yeah, but it says a label CPC. I'm not familiar with this with this specific label.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, we can kind of get back to you, because currently the kind of the default naming convention is just for a user. It's basically CPC and then part of their UPN username. So we can back to you, and also with that answer we can go back to Microsoft Learn and update it.
Yes, my first intention is that this is not, the label is not part of what we use as the health checks today. It's probably a label to identify the PC itself, but I will need to kind of circle back on this. But I'm not familiar with this label as part of the checks that we do today, health checks.
Okay, yeah, no worries. So yeah, to circle back again, we have the feedback channel, but also if you do want to start a discussion thread in our tech community channel, you can also do that. And that's at ak.ms/w365tc for our tech community. But yeah, we'll circle back with you, Ian. Thanks for the great question. Let's see. Wow, we actually have a couple more minutes left. But we do have one more from Jason. I have been trying to get some answers to how Windows 365 handles fault tolerance in DR. What I found and been told so far is that if there are compute and or storage issues, the resources will move to another zone, and that is great for the compute and storage portion. What I cannot find any answers on is how the Azure network connection failure is handled. Since the network connection connects the Cloud PC to our virtual network, where our domain controllers are in order for the employee to do work. It got cut off. But that's a great question. What happens to the network connection? So yeah, so for so right now you're correct. We're doing we're doing the kind of the backup DR for kind of for the zone for zone failures. And for the actual regions and the network connections, I actually feel like I'll have to come back to you on this one. I know that we do want to handle this because we want to make our DR story, cross Azure region. I know that's definitely our goal. It's like if an entire region goes down, how do we handle that? And especially the network connection, it is directly tied to a region. So I know that we have goals and hopes to handle that, but I don't have anything concrete to answer right now because I also may just be misleading you. So let me we can follow up on that one. I think this is another great discussion, perhaps on the Windows 365 tech community channel for a whole blog discussion. So I think we handle that discussion there. I just don't want to mislead you and provide incorrect info when we have experts on our team that are more versed in this and are guiding this strategy. So okay. So again, thank you for all the questions. Jason, Ian, Trix, John, everyone. Sorry if I missed your name, and Lewis. So thank you for all the questions today. Again, hopefully you found this useful, and hopefully you continue to join us every month. We do have a schedule of events at ak.ms/Windows in the Cloud. So that is both for this Ask Me Anything or Ask Microsoft Anything, excuse me. And also the monthly Windows in the Cloud episodes that are led by our very own Christian Brinkoff with different guests joining him every month to talk about new features and new scenarios. So please do join us for both of these discussions. So thank you again. And we definitely hope to see you next month. And hopefully you enjoy Ignite coming up next month as well.